Hi folks, HR Funk here, back in front of the camera once again with my brand new 2023 Remington Model 700 SPS Varmint rifle. This is my second installment in this series where I'm taking a look at these new production rifles to see if they are back up to the quality standards that we came to expect years ago with the older Remington firearms. In part one of this series, I was comparing this rifle and its features and characteristics to my older, circa 1991 Remington Model 700 police rifle, which is a very similar rifle to this one. And in this video, I'm going to be heading off to the range to see what kind of accuracy we can expect with these new rifles. So since the last video, the only thing that I have done to this rifle is mount this loopholed scope. Other than that, it's still completely in its factory configuration, so it's factory stock, factory trigger, factory barrel, etc. So we are going to be taking a look at the accuracy potential of a factory rifle, not a rifle with any number of accuracy enhancements. After mounting the scope 2 days ago, I went out to the range to zero this optic, and it was one of the easiest zeroing sessions I have ever had with a rifle. I'll show you the target that I used and talk a little bit about how that process went right now. So here is the target that I started out, my zeroing process, and I was at a distance of 25 yards, and prior to going out to the range to zero the rifle, I did mechanically center that scope. So from 25 yards, I fired my first shot, which struck right here, and I was not able to go down range and measure this. There were other shooters out there that day, but it looked to be about 2 inches to the left when I fired that first shot. So I made a 2-inch correction, which at 25 yards is about 7.5 minutes of angle, just slightly larger than that, and fired this shot. And I decided that was good enough for 25 yards, and it was time to move on to 100 yards. And here's how things went at 100 yards. And I should have mentioned in the last segment, the ammunition that I was using for this zeroing process was plain old 7.62 NATO M80 149 grain full metal jacket ammunition. So it was not match ammo or anything special. Even so, after firing those 2 shots at 25 yards, here is shot number 3, dead center in the head of the target from that distance of 100 yards. So things were looking really good here. After that, I decided to fire a group, and the temperature when I was at the range this day was right a little over 20 degrees. I think it was 23 degrees, and I was getting a stiff wind coming out of my 12 o'clock. So it was cold. And the ammunition was cooling off as I was there, and when I fired a 3-shot group, you can see it was about 1 minute of angle low from that distance. And I've experienced this before. When you get to the range and the ammunition is still relatively warm, it's shooting okay, and as it gets cooler and cooler and cooler, the shots start striking lower and lower and lower. So I fired a 3-shot group from that distance, and shots 4, 5, and 6 are 0.6 MOA. So not bad at all. Just over half minute of angle with plain old M80 ammunition. I came up 3/4 of a minute and fired shot number 7, and you can see it only raised it slightly above the 3-shot group with 4, 5, and 6. So because of the weather conditions and the temperature and everything, I decided to stop. I was not going to sit around out there all day and wait for the ammunition to acclimate and then try to establish a zero. I thought this was good enough for that particular day. I had a zero I could work with when I went back on a better day to start working with my match loads. So with zeroing complete, yesterday I was back out to the range again, this time taking along 6 different types of .308 Winchester match ammunition. And with the test, I was looking to see not only what the accuracy looked like overall through that entire spectrum of ammunition, but also to see if the rifle had a preference for any particular type of bullet weight or bullet configuration. When I got to the range, I set up at a distance of 100 yards, and from that distance I was shooting 5-shot groups. Now with a heavy-barreled varmint-style rifle, I would expect minute of angle accuracy or better. Anything less than that, or maybe I should say anything more than that, anything larger than minute of angle, really isn't quite living up to what I would expect a rifle like this to be able to produce. Minute of angle or better definitely is living up to my expectation for a factory rifle. Keep in mind, we're talking about a factory rifle here, not some sort of a super accurized custom rifle. And obviously, the farther below minute of angle the rifle is capable of achieving, the better and better it's living up to my expectations. So when I got there and set everything up, the first ammunition that I was testing was 155 grain Hornady steel match. Now this is a 155 grain Hornady match bullet loaded in a steel casing, and I've not had great luck with this ammunition in the past. Some rifles kind of seem to think it's okay, some rifles absolutely hate it. So I was interested to see what the SPS varmint was going to think of it from that distance of 100 yards, and here's how the test went. So here's an up-close look at that target with the Hornady steel match. Now prior to starting this test, I did fire 3 fouling shots through the rifle using that M80 full metal jacket ammunition. So this was not a clean cold bore. Now all the snipers out there are yelling right now, you can't do that, you got to track your cold bore shot and all that. I know. But I have to find the ammunition that I'm going to use first, then I'll start tracking that cold bore shot. So I wanted to give the ammunition the best conditions that I could to achieve a good tight group. The very first shot that I fired hit way down here, so it was away from an otherwise not too bad group. I think this is slightly over, in fact I wrote it down here, this is 1.25 inches, so a little over a minute of angle, but it's not horrible except for this shot right here. And this is a theme that we'll see repeated with these targets later on. The entire group size was 2.125 inches, so again, I'm not seeing tremendous accuracy with that Hornady steel match. This is another rifle that doesn't care for it all that much. Again, that 4-shot group there is not horrible, but it's definitely not up to the accuracy level that I was hoping for when I started this test. The next load in the test was from Sig, and it's a Sig 168 grain match load. And I was curious if the SPS varmint was going to like that 168 grain match bullet better than it liked the 155 grain Hornady. Now my old work rifle, my 700P, has a preference for 168 grain bullets, but it also has a 1 turn and 12-inch rifling twist ratio, whereas the new SPS varmint has a 1 in 10 twist rate. So I thought maybe it's going to like heavier bullets a little bit more than it likes those 168 grain bullets. So let's find out how the first test with the 168 grain load went. The Sig load did pretty well, and this shot, this was my last shot, was actually a called flyer. In fact, I wrote it on here. I also made a notation of it in my data book for this rifle. I saw the crosshairs dip slightly right there. Even so, this group is 7/8 of an inch, so 0.875 inches, which works out to 0.83 minutes of angle. So sub-minute of angle group with the 168 grain Sig load. That's my first sub-minute of angle group out of this rifle for this particular test, and I was happy to see it. Next up is the second 168 grain load in this test, and that's from IMI. It's their semi-auto match cartridge, which, as I said, features a 168 grain match bullet. Let's head back out to the range and see how it did. And here's the target from that IMI match load test. And again, we see one round that separates itself from an otherwise pretty good group. The overall group size here is 1 3/8 inches. The best 4 is in 5/8 of an inch. So I think I might have an idea what's going on here. I'll talk about that toward the end of the video. But again, this one lone flyer is starting to concern me. Next up is a load that should be familiar to any military snipers out there. It's the military's M118LR. Let's see how it did in the SPS varmint. The M118LR managed the second sub-minute of angle group of the day. Again, this measures 7/8 of an inch, and all these groups are measured center to center, by the way. 7/8 of an inch, which as I said before, works out to 0.83 minutes of angle. So sub-minute of angle group number 2, things are looking good. And it seems like as I'm moving into these heavier bullet weights, we're seeing things start to get a little bit more consistent, although also we're getting more and more shots through that barrel. And it's a brand new barrel, so it's still breaking in. Next, I had another 175 grain load, this time from Federal. It's Federal's 175 grain gold medal match load. Let's head back out and see how it did in the SPS varmint. Way to start off. Folks, that second shot was odd. The trigger broke almost as soon as I touched it with my trigger finger. Let's see where the next ones land. The 175 grain Federal gold medal match again had that one fly. I think this was the last shot that I fired out of that 5-shot group. So I've got 4 shots that are probably sub-minute of angle right there, and the last shot opened it up to 1 1/8 inch, 1.125 inches, which works out to 1.0734 minutes of angle. So just slightly over minute of angle because of that one shot. The final load of the day was a heavyweight, at least among this range of ammunition. It's a 185 grain Federal open tip match load. And I didn't know whether the rifle was going to like it or not. As I said a little while ago, it has a 1 turn in 10-inch rifling twist ratio, so I thought that might bode well. Let's head back out and we'll see how it did with that load. Not sure what just happened to my target camera, folks, but it is down. I took a down range and check that in a little bit. Definite shift in the point of impact with these heavier bullets. We might have found one that it likes. I'd say we did. And unfortunately, my target camera fell over, so you couldn't see that one. I'll have to go down and see what happened there. I don't know what happened, folks. Apparently the wind caught my target camera with a gust and took it over, but here is the result of those 5 shots with the 185 grain open tip match federal ammunition. And I'm going to have to measure that, but that's looking like probably close to half a minute of angle. So on the last group, the one that you couldn't see on the camera, I finally shot the best group of the day with that new 700 SPS. So of course, the best group of the day is the one where the wind blew my camera over. And I think you saw the very first shot. That was one of these up here. And after that, the camera fell over and I just continued to fire the group. And this ended up coming in at 0.625 inches, which works out to 0.5963 MOA. So I think we can probably call that 0.6 MOA. Nice, respectable group right there, especially for a factory rifle. And again, I think this shows the potential of the SPS varmint, and it does show a tendency toward liking these heavier bullets. So after all this shooting, there's a couple of things that I think are kind of interesting about the test. First off, out of all 6 loads tested, 3 of them were sub-minute of angle loads. The Sig was 0.875 inches, the M118LR was 0.875 inches, and of course the 185 grain open tip match federal was 0.625 inches. So half the loads are sub-minute of angle. 2 of the loads that were above minute of angle were above minute of angle because of one shot that went wide of an otherwise pretty good group. And I'll talk about what I think might be going on with that here in a moment. When I average the group size of all 5 5-shot groups, I come up with an average 5-shot group size of 1.167 inches. That works out mathematically to 1.1135 MOA. So that would round to 1.1 minute of angle for 6 different types of ammunition. So the rifle with all the ammunition is averaging just right at or slightly above 1 minute of angle, and with half of the loads that I tested today, it is firing groups that are below minute of angle. So accuracy-wise, not too bad for a factory rifle. Now with regard to what I think might be causing some of those shots to go wide, I really don't like the stock that's on the SPS varmint. Since the barrel is not free-floated, when I am sitting at the bench and I have my cheek resting on the stock and my body weight is pushing forward on it, if the stock flexes at all and influences the barrel in any way that changes the barrel harmonics for one shot as opposed to another shot, that can cause an occasional shot to go wide. I just don't like that. I think it's leaving room for doubt as to whether or not those flyers are actually flyers or if they're being induced by pressure from the stock on the barrel changing from one shot to the next, or changing for one shot out of a 5-shot group. So one of the changes I'm going to make to this rifle very soon is I'm going to be changing the stock. I'm probably going to be making some other changes to it as well as we move forward in this series, because I'm really looking now at modifying this rifle and trying to make it as accurate as I can while maintaining the factory barrel. And I think this is going to be capable of much better accuracy even than we've seen today, and some of the accuracy saw was pretty darn good. Another thing that I experienced while shooting the SPS varmint that I did not notice when I was looking at it here in the shop is something kind of odd with the trigger. And this is the X-Mark Pro adjustable trigger that I talked about in part 1 of this series. And I noticed as I was applying pressure to the trigger, and I should probably get a close-up to try to show you this, there's a little bit of a, I'm going to call it a tick. I'm pushing, and then I'll feel some movement right there. there's maybe a 32nd of an inch of movement that I feel. Now, it occurs at the point before the trigger breaks most of the time, I think, or at least that I'm conscious of it. But the other thing that I noticed with the trigger is there were times, and I mentioned this when I was shooting the test with one of the types of ammunition, I don't remember which one, that it seemed like I had just started to apply pressure to the trigger and it broke. There were other times that it seemed like I was applying more pressure to the trigger than I should have needed to for it to break. So I think the consistency of this Exmark Pro trigger is somewhat questionable. And I mentioned in part 1 also that all of the new Remington Model 700 rifles that are being produced since July of this year are going to be shipping with Timney triggers as factory equipment. I might contact Remington and see if I can get them to send me one of those Timney triggers to replace the one that's in the rifle here, because there is just something weird going on there. That could be something maybe over time, that as the sear and the trigger get a little bit of wear, that tick goes away. But I don't know. I don't like it. It's somewhat distracting. I don't think the tick, that slight movement, is taking away from the accuracy, although I think maybe some of the times that I'm squeezing the trigger and it seems like I just touch it and it fires, that could be taking away from accuracy. So in any regard, I think there is a new trigger in the future for this rifle as well. So stay tuned as we work our way through this rifle. This is going to be a winter project of mine. There are going to be more episodes coming up in this series, and we'll see just what all we might be able to do with this rifle as we go. Also, the barrel is still breaking in. At this point, it has less than 40 rounds through it total, and it's not uncommon for factory barrels as they break in to show better and better accuracy as they go. Then that accuracy stays very constant for a while until finally the barrel wears out and then the accuracy just goes away. So again, stay tuned. We're going to see what we can do with this rifle to hopefully improve it in the months to come. And that's going to do it for this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. Also, remember House of Pain. If you go to House of Pain Munitions or House of Pain Armament, you can use my discount code there, which is HRFUNK10, and that'll save you 10% on your purchase from House of Pain. And of course, remember the Target sponsor for the channel. Go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, folks. Until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.